My name is Ethan, and I'm a photographer. Last year, I took a trip with my wife to the Colorado mountains for an art project. My wife is also an avid skier, so she convinced me to add skiing to the trip. We had the option to book a room at a ski resort or rent a private log cabin. The second option seemed more romantic, so I picked that one. Plus, it didn't hurt that it was cheaper. The cabin was nothing luxurious. It was a single-floor, 4-room little place. A 2-person bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It may have been small, but the idea of being secluded in a warm log cabin during a blizzard was amazing. However, the storm interfered with the cable signal, so we didn't have much to do. One particular evening, it was just starting to get dark out, but there was still enough light outside. I thought it would be perfect for getting a few shots and videos in the blizzard for backgrounds and wallpapers. I told my wife I'd be back within 10 minutes and slipped on my boots and coat. The moment I stepped outside and shut the door, I noticed footsteps leading up to the door in the snow that had blown under the wooden awning. I could see the prints doubled as whoever left them turned and walked in the opposite direction. I was freaked out, but I wasn't about to go inside and scare my wife. I decided to give in to my curiosity and followed the prints to the right side of the cabin. Immediately, I noticed they led to the bedroom window. My heart froze in fear when I saw this. I could see my wife sitting on the bed using her iPad. She noticed me, and I waved. She laughed. I continued to follow the footprints around the cabin to the other side. They led to the living room window. Someone had been stalking us, but how long ago? That was the question. I stood there for a good minute, wondering if I should follow the footprints any further. For whatever reason, I decided I would. They were now leading away from the cabin. I knew I was following the prints to where this person was going, not coming from, simply by the boot marks. I followed the prints away from the clearing and into the trees. That was when I saw him. A man wearing a black coat, facing a tree, slouched down, looking at the ground. He was still as a statue, and I could see the snow piling up on his hood and shoulders. I froze in my tracks, trying not to make a sound. I would have thought to ask him if he needed help, but this guy was just standing there, not doing anything, like some kind of deranged freak. I started to gradually move backward without turning around, making sure this man didn't notice me. When I got out of visual range, I turned and stomped through the snow back to the cabin. I slammed the door shut, and my wife came over to see what was wrong. I saw worry in her eyes. She must have seen the worry in mine. She knew I'd seen something, and after a few minutes of her pressing me, I finally told her what I saw. She immediately started packing her things, telling me we were leaving right away. I told her no. We weren't going anywhere. I wouldn't get a refund for leaving early, and I wasn't about to up and leave just because some weird guy was walking around outside. She made a point of locking both locks on the door and making sure all the windows were sealed shut. For the rest of the night, we read on our iPads, and I reviewed the pictures and videos I'd taken so far. We turned out the lights early, as there wasn't much else to do. What if he's still out there? I remember my wife asking. "There's no way he's still out there," I assured her, listening to the wind blowing outside, along with the small flakes of snow hitting the windows, was strangely relaxing, and I knew I'd fall asleep quickly. Except, I wouldn't, if it weren't for the knock at the bedroom window. We were both still awake, and we both knew it was a knock from a person. I ushered my wife out of bed and into the living room without turning on any lights. There was nothing to use as a weapon whatsoever. Our only option was to run before something happened. I told my wife we'd have to forget our luggage and make a dash for the Jeep. We slipped on our boots and coats in the dark in a matter of seconds. When we heard a knock at the living room window from the opposite side, we took that opportunity to run. I pressed the unlock button, so grateful I'd chosen remote locks for my Wrangler. We hopped in, and the car started with ease. As soon as the headlights flashed on, I saw him, the man, standing facing the log cabin. Not a window, just the wall. He stood in the same position as before, as if he were hiding his face. We drove to the nearby ski resort without much trouble. We stayed there for the night and went back the next day to the log cabin to collect our things. He wasn't there. When I was 17 years old and home alone, coincidentally on the night I tried pot for the first time, I experienced the most horrifying moment of my life. It was mid-December, during a late fall snowstorm. I was in my room with a movie on in the background. Mrs. Doubtfire, if I recall correctly. Though I wasn't paying much attention, I was trying to figure out how to properly inhale without coughing. I think I spent about half an hour breathing in smoke from that pipe, yet I couldn't even tell if I felt any different. For another 10 minutes, I kept at it, and finally, I felt something. It was a new feeling, hard to explain at the time. The room around me felt more calming. I was more attentive to my surroundings, or maybe less attentive. I couldn't really tell. All I knew was that I felt different. I was excited and wanted to keep going. Then, suddenly, I felt as if I heard a sound coming from downstairs. I muted my TV and listened. It sounded like a tapping noise coming from the front door, like a light knock. I got nervous that it was my parents or sister. I didn't know if I'd be acting differently or if they would be able to pick up on the smell in the house. I headed downstairs and looked through the peephole, not to find my parents or sister, but a severely underdressed, almost homeless-looking man. To put this into perspective, we don't live in the type of suburbs a lot of people do. We don't exactly live in a completely desolate area either. We have neighbors, but the houses are about 200 yards apart, which doesn't sound like much. But on a dark, stormy night, with some random dirty-looking man I'd never seen before standing on my porch, I naturally pretended I wasn't home. I stood there, watching through the peephole as the guy stayed put, knocking again, this time louder. I knew I wasn't going to answer, so I walked back upstairs to my room and shut the door. In a sense, I felt bad, but I would never let a stranger into my house. I couldn't imagine what else he could have wanted other than to be let in. Time passed as I continued hitting the pipe, getting more adjusted to it, and starting to really feel its effects. I felt like my mind was wandering, forgetting I was even lying in my bed, or that I was in my bedroom for that matter. Then there was a loud thud at my window. I jumped up, quicker than a mousetrap when I heard it. It sounded like a rock hit my window. I shut off the TV. The only source of light in the bedroom was now off. It was pitch black. It took me a while to connect this to the man at the stoop. He was still out there. I was in here. There was nothing he could do to me, I assured myself. However, being high made me more paranoid, afraid of every little noise. In fact, I seemed more alert to every sound, even small house noises, like random cracks in the walls. Nothing happened after a few minutes, and being in the darkness tired me out. Apparently, I had just learned that pot puts you to sleep more effectively than sleeping pills. I woke up sometime later, thinking it must have been 3 in the morning, but I looked at the clock, and it was only 12:41. I had only been asleep for like 20 minutes. I sat up, thinking I heard something from down in the den. I rubbed my eyes, and then remembered the man. My heart started racing again. I was about to get up when I realized something across the room. There was something beyond my half-open door. I leaned in and squinted my eyes. There was somebody peering into the room at me from behind the door. I let out the most horrified, gut-wrenching scream possible as the person emerged from behind the door and started walking into the room. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling over myself, too disoriented to react quickly. It was the man from earlier. He was standing in my room, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes, his mouth slightly open as if caught mid-thought. I couldn't move. My whole body froze in terror. Finally, instinct kicked in. I bolted for the door, shoving past him with all my strength. I sprinted down the stairs and out the front door into the cold night air. My bare feet hit the snow, but I didn't care. I ran to my neighbor's house as fast as I could. I pounded on their door until they let me in. The police were called, but when they arrived, the man was gone. There were no signs of forced entry and nothing in my house was taken. The front door was still locked. The police said I might have hallucinated it because of the drugs, but I know what I saw. That man was real. I'm sure of it. I used to work as a pizza delivery guy during my college years to make some extra money. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but it was usually straightforward. Until one night that still haunts me to this day. It was late, around 11 p.m., when I got an order from an address I didn't recognize. It was a bit out of the way, down some country roads, but I thought nothing of it. It wasn't unusual to get calls from places off the beaten path. I grabbed the pizza and headed out. The roads were dark, with no streetlights, and the GPS led me down a narrow dirt road that I hadn't been on before. I started to feel uneasy, but I kept going, thinking it was just my imagination. Eventually, I reached the house, a run-down old place with no lights on. The only sign of life was a dim glow from a window on the second floor. I parked and got out, grabbing the pizza. As I walked up to the front door, I noticed something strange. The house was completely silent. No sounds of movement inside, no barking dogs, nothing. I knocked on the door and waited. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time. Still, no response. I was about to leave when I heard a faint noise, almost like a whisper, coming from inside the house. I knocked one last time, and this time, I heard footsteps approaching the door. My heart started racing as I waited. The door creaked open just a crack, but no one was standing there. I could feel my skin crawl as I peered into the darkness, trying to see who had opened the door. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I stepped back, deciding I was done. I placed the pizza on the doorstep and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A low, raspy voice from inside the house. "Come inside." Every instinct in my body told me to run, but something compelled me to look back. The door was now open wider, but there was still no one in sight. I felt like I was being watched. My hands started to shake as I slowly backed away toward my car. I could hear the voice again, clearer this time. "Come inside." It was chilling, like something out of a nightmare. I bolted to my car, fumbling with the keys in my shaking hands. As I started the engine and sped off down the dirt road, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw something, or someone, standing in the doorway, watching me drive away. I never took a delivery to that area again. A few days later, I asked my boss about that address. He said it had been abandoned for years,